Is this the best longsword ever made? Isn't it a beauty, right? I just got it for cutting tatami mats and water bottles, and for you to watch 2 unskippable ads before this video. Alright, okay, I'm just kidding. I'm probably not the only one who sees this type of content, of sword reviews, on YouTube mainly. And don't get me wrong, this content isn't bad. Like, it's alright, like, it's very cool that there are actual reviews of different longsword products, or sword products, or rapiers, sabers, and whatever, right? But still, this video is sponsored by the company which made this longsword. So the main thing I want to talk about today is the weird concept of obsessing over individual longsword products over the actual sword fighting technique. So let me tell you a short story about me. Before I actually started to train hema for serious, I always dreamt of at least owning one longsword for practice purposes. And as a beginner, I didn't really knew what type of sword I should get, right? Of course, I clearly knew that getting a sharpened longsword wouldn't be good for the actual practice, because a sharpened longsword is only good against tatami mats and water bottles, and of course, eventual realistic enemies, right? But let's not actually talk about that. And instead of actually getting the right tools as a complete newcomer to the sport, even before I actually went to the hema club that I'm training in and actually learned something serious from masters, I actually got a steel feather schwert. I'll even show you. So the feather schwert that you saw in my old videos on this channel. And this specific one is from Krieger in Poland, not the US company. And it's a good feather schwert, don't get me wrong. It has 125 centimeters of total length. And this specific feather schwert is quite honestly a good training sword, training longsword specifically, for sparring, right? But only if you have sufficient protective gear in the first place. And that's what I mean. You, as a beginner, you don't have a say in what is a good training longsword or a training saber, because you don't know pretty much anything. So if you ever stumble upon steel practice longswords, or could be saber or rapier, whatever you're interested in, then if it's made for practice, it's usually good enough. So to actually finish my story, right, I got this feather schwert, and as every newcomer to the sword fighting, I was copying masters from YouTube. I was trying to imitate, copy the tutorials or guides on YouTube about how to learn longsword from the very beginning. And the worst part is that usually, and I would say even like 80% of all of these videos out there on the YouTube, most of them are made mainly for intermediates, if that makes sense. Also for advanced guys as well. So the guys who already understand the context of basic maneuvers with a sword, how to make basic strikes, how to defend with parries, how to move properly on your feet, because sword fighting isn't just swinging your sword, it's also moving towards your opponent or decreasing the distance towards your opponent so he can't reach you, right? It's all of these things, not the sword itself, because the sword is just an extension of you. It's just an extension of your skill. The sword doesn't give you powers, you give it to it. And that's the important line I want you to remember. So to finish the whole story, right, I haven't learned anything from YouTube videos before I actually went and trained with masters. I tried to copy, imitate all of these fancy solo drills, but I didn't understand the logic behind all of these moves. Why we do these maneuvers in the first place? What's the logic behind it? The first thing that I needed to actually do as a beginner is to have some sort of specific curriculum, specifically trying to learn the language of sword fighting, so of fencing. Because if you can't understand basic maneuvers, just like letters in some kind of alphabet in another language, then you're not really able to learn words, if that makes sense, right? If you can't pronounce individual letters in a new language, you cannot make sentences with it, right? You somewhat can understand something from a broad context, but not the nuance. And the nuance is very important here for the beginners. So right now, from my time perspective, I can clearly say that buying the steel feather schwert without any gear, protective gear whatsoever, was a huge waste of money. Why? It's just a simple tool. And of course, I'm not talking about the practice swords or actually sharpened long swords, which cost less than they should. For example, long swords made under $100 are usually just a heavy slab of metal, which are very unwieldy, compared to the actual long swords, which is supposed to be precision weapon. It's supposed to be dexterity weapon, right? Like, of course, if you have more strength in your arms and in your legs, you're better at delivering the strike, but you don't need a huge like force and strength behind your strikes. You don't need a lot of also momentum behind. You need specific control of delivering your strikes, but also being able to fluently interchange between offense and defense quickly. That's the way of sword fighting. When I actually got the full gear for actually sparring with this steel feather schwert, a year and a half already passed from the time I started to actually learn the skill of sword fighting instead of obsessing over the just individual longsword. And this one is quite short compared to most of the feather schwerts in my club and generally in Poland, which usually have 10 centimeters longer blades and hilt, which makes them reach further than this one. For example, making any sort of thrust, so actually delivering a thrust which would connect with my opponent, would need to take me doing a lot of footwork preparation and a lot of footwork training to actually successfully hit my opponent with a thrust because of the limited reach with my feather schwert, so with this longsword. But also this short one compared to the Sigi King is a lot more useful and a lot easier to make parry riposte with because it's shorter and it's far more maneuverable because of it. Also, yeah, as you can clearly see, the blade on this one is a bit thinner than the massive blade on the Sigi King, right? Also, the one thing it's better than the Sigi King is actually feinting. So like quicker feints and quicker maneuverability in general. But compared to the Sigi King, the whole length of the sword is much longer. So with the Sigi King, it's a lot easier to deliver a successful thrust for me. I'm not saying it will be easier for you. And that's what I want to upload into your mind, that individual longswords don't make you good at sword fighting. Having a better longsword doesn't mean that you'll be better at sword fighting. Because me, at the beginning, I started off with just a simple training longsword. And I had to actually learn specific footwork. I actually had to learn how to wield a simpler one, maybe not the best one for me, to then branch out into like a better one for me specifically. So the one specific line that I'm about to tell you, like you should really ingrain it into your mind, that stop min-maxing your swords, because yeah, it doesn't give you powers. And if you buy a steel training longsword, or even worse, a sharpened one, then it's a complete waste of money if it's without any protective gear required. Let me get this straight. Is your goal is to actually learn how to wield a longsword properly, or to just buy a sharpened toy, so a sharpened longsword, to just goof around and cut through the tatami mats and water bottles? Alright, you could say it's for self-defense. Like, I'm not against it, right? But the thing is it just mainly for you to play around or to actually learn something for real? Cutting through the tatami mats, it's fun, right? Don't get me wrong. But it doesn't teach you how to behave in an actual exchange of sword fighting, so under the actual pressure. Because the control of the actual weapon and how you fight with against just pure, unrefined momentum for your strikes with proper edge alignment, doesn't mean that you'll be better at sword fighting. It doesn't translate directly into sword fighting, if you know what I mean. Listen, my man, stop trying to min-max your swords. You're not a hero of some kind of video game. It's not an RPG. Yes, building a skill in sword fight would generally translate to any type of longsword. If you obsess over learning the actual skill of sword fighting, it will translate to any sword that you pick up. If you know the general fundamentals, the basics of movement with footwork, how to strike, how to defend with a parry, how to defend with distance also, how to decrease the distance while you deliver the strike, then you can adjust the smaller things to another longsword or to another sword category. So could be saber, could be rapier with dagger, could be sword and buckler, whatever you're interested in the most. So let's be honest here with me, you and me. You're just an untrained beginner who wants to just get a sword and swing around. Yes, that's the step zero of everyone who starts sword fighting. But wouldn't you want to actually learn something for real that you could utilize against sparring opponents? I want to tell you that any practice sword is usually good enough for you as a beginner. You don't really know what works for you, and that's okay, that's all right. Any type of longsword made for practice is good enough, and if it's usable, it's even better. But you as a beginner, you definitely don't have sufficient protective gear to spar with a steel longsword. Like steel on steel, what I mean. The best alternative would be the padded longsword or a padded saber if you're more into sabers, all right? So why the padded longsword? It's a perfect tool for actual practice and training and sparring because it's lightweight. You don't have to fight against the weight of the sword. You can actually practice your strikes and you can actually spar with another human being instead of a water bottle or a tatami mat. Of course, taking hits from a padded longsword isn't pleasant, but you can actually hit your opponent with the intention to actually connect your strike. There is no room for you to hold your strikes back because like the best way to actually learn how to at least strike your opponent is to not have any second thoughts, to not hold your strikes back. Of course, you don't need overwhelming force to strike at your opponent. No, because you'll be losing structure. It's actually knowing that when you hit him, you will not wound him for you. The one thing also which comes in pair with a padded longsword is just a bare bones, most simple fencing mask. It's just one of these things for your head protection. Because taking hits to your arm or to your leg or to your chest with a padded longsword, you can do that, right? But to your nose, to your eyes, to your mouth, even if it's padded, that's not safe, all right? So just having a fencing mask with a padded longsword is a perfect entry for any newcomer and beginner to sword fighting who wants to already spar, okay? Another thing that I want to tell you is that most of the swords online and offline that are for actual sale are usually wall hangers, unusable wall hangers. So just a heavy slab of metal, which is like the only purpose is to actually hang on a wall instead of actually use it correctly. When you type buy longsword into the web, they would usually show you wall hangers. Like 80% of all of these products are just unusable wall hangers. They are not meant for training even. Of course, this entire video is a rant video, but don't get me wrong. I'm not personally attacking all of the guys who make these swords, who produce sharpened swords or blunt swords, or the content creators who specialize in reviewing all of this stuff. No, I'm not against it. But it's a weird view that I want to catch and just show you specifically that I want you to avoid, if that makes sense. I don't want you to focus on the product side of the longsword. Like, I want to tell you that actually learning the fundamentals of longsword is way, way better than obsessing over some kind of fantasy sword that you could buy in real life. So stop obsessing over the sword and start obsessing over the sword fighting skill. And if this video changed how you think about sword fighting, then consider joining my free school community, the link in the description, where I actually go more in depth into what you actually need to start without extreme fitness nor spending a fortune on the gear. All right, and if you join us right now, I will personally reach out to you to help with your sword fighting skill. Okay, and yeah, remember, always take the initiative.